This morning I want to talk to you about what it means to be blessed. It seems everywhere people are talking constantly about being blessed. You hear it and read it everywhere. On television, radio, Facebook, and church. Everywhere you go, people are saying they're blessed. After a national championship, they're asked how they feel, and they say, I'm blessed. Or someone will post a picture of their family on social media somewhere, and they will put at the bottom, I'm blessed. People everywhere are blessed about everything, right? Some say they're blessed to be a Southerner or an American. Some people say they're blessed because they live in Franklin or because they have a new car or a big house or being married to the person of their dreams. Winning a music award or acting award. The list is endless. Some people, when you ask them how they're doing, instead of responding with hello or I'm doing well or I'm not doing well, they respond with I'm blessed. Benita Reisner wrote in her book, feeling blessed is in vogue, which means it's fashionable or culturally popular to say, I'm blessed. Everyone says it. It is one of the most widely used responses today. Reisner also says people even use being blessed as a way to appear humble while boasting. They'll put a picture of their family on some social media site, and underneath it they'll say, I'm blessed, or they'll show their child's report card, and underneath it, if it's all A's, they'll say, I'm so blessed. Or if they're away on an exotic vacation and there's a beautiful sunset over the beach, they'll put at the bottom, so blessed, so blessed. So what does it mean to be blessed? What does it mean to be blessed? For many who use the phrase in our culture and even in our church, the blessed life is synonymous with the good life. A good marriage, a great job, a nice house, a new car, obedient children, good friends, a strong, healthy body, money in the bank, and a great retirement plan is the blessed life, Many associate blessings with prosperity. Many Christians think being blessed means having your needs met, plus a lot of your wants. If being prosperous or having what you want is a sign of blessing, of God's blessing, then wouldn't it make sense that the one who is the most prosperous, who has the most of their desires met, wouldn't it be just logical to assume then that that person is the most blessed? And those who do not have their basic needs met, or those who do not have the resources to go on some exotic vacation, or those who struggle with their health, wouldn't it be logical then to assume also that they're not blessed, that somehow God has not blessed them? But there are plenty of examples all around us of people who have everything that they could desire, and yet they're very miserable. They are sad. They long for things. So the idea that the blessed life is the life that has the most, or the life that gets the most good is the most blessed, is simply not supported by reality. So what does it mean to be blessed? What does it actually mean to be blessed? Well, I want you to listen to the words of Jesus at the beginning of His most famous sermon, the Sermon on the Mount, found in Matthew chapter 5, as He describes some people that He considers to be blessed. I'm going to be reading Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. Jesus says, when Jesus saw the crowds, He went up on the mountain, and after He sat down, His disciples came to Him. He opened His mouth and began to teach them, saying, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the gentle, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. These words of Jesus are radically different from the way that we normally think of a person who is blessed. We normally associate being blessed with prosperity, but Jesus says the poor, the persecuted, those who mourn are in fact blessed. So we need to start by asking ourselves, what does the word blessed mean? In the Greek, the word here that's translated blessed is an adjective. It's markurios, which is translated over 50 times in the New Testament as blessed. It basically has the meaning of being favored or fortunate or privileged. The word is sometimes translated happy, but happy is not a good translation, because according to this definition that Jesus gives of those who are blessed, they're not always necessarily happy. They're not always happy. Think about being persecuted. Being happy doesn't normally come to mind. Or being poor in spirit. Happy is not the word that always comes to mind. So we need to think of it as Jesus is saying here, that those who are poor in spirit, that those who are persecuted, they are privileged or fortunate, as we shall see, because God is doing something in their life. And so again, these words that Jesus says are so contrary to our normal understanding of what it means to be blessed. Look at who Jesus says are fortunate or privileged. The poor in spirit, those who mourn, and those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Those who are persecuted because of Him. These are the privileged. These are the fortunate. These are the ones that Jesus considers blessed. These statements are so contrary to our cultural understanding of who is blessed. They go against what people believe today. But not only today, they went against what the people in Jesus' day believed. You see, the people in Jesus' day associated hardship or illness or poverty with somehow being cursed by God. But that's simply not true. Listen to what the disciples ask Jesus as they see a man born blind. They say, as they passed by this man, they saw a man born blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? That would have been their natural inclination, to assume that someone was guilty of sin for this man to have been born blind. But Jesus answered, it was not this man that sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. So Jesus, in a roundabout way, is saying that this man was not born blind because of his sin or his parents' sin, but he was born blind to present an opportunity for God to use him. Again, this is not what we normally think of as being blessed. But let's bring it into our culture today. Who would ever say, I went to the doctor today and he gave me a bad report. I feel so blessed. A bad report from the doctor could be a blessing. Struggling to make ends meet could be a sign of God's favor upon you. Being harassed because you are a follower of Christ could be a privilege handed down to you by Jesus' loving hand. Feeling alone and abandoned by your friends might be a sign of God's favor. Do you normally think of it that way? I don't. So why? How could hardship in our lives actually be a blessing? Why? Because it's at those times that our soul seeks what is more important than money, health, and anything else this world has to offer. It is at these times Our soul seeks the presence of God. Because it's at these times when we can no longer handle life on our own, when we can no longer handle it through our own strength, our own wealth, or our friends, or our wisdom to solve life's situation. Because it's at these times when we reach the end of ourselves and we have nowhere else to turn, that we are more likely to turn to the one who loves us most and who is truly able to satisfy our deepest longing. Our deepest longing. Jesus knew that real satisfaction did not come from possessions or status or having all of our wants and desires met, but He understood that real joy, real peace, and anything else our soul truly longs for is only found in an intimate relationship with Him and His Father. And many times it's life's struggles, it's life's disappointments, trials that break our heart, that draw us closer to the one who can truly satisfy our soul. It's at these times when we lose our loved ones, when we're physically weak, when we face financial hardship and persecution, that we run and we look for the one who can satisfy the soul. And so Jesus says these people, these brokenhearted, those who mourn, those who are financially or spiritually in poverty, they are the ones who are truly blessed. Because they're the ones who no longer find their own strength, find their own money, find their friends to be what really satisfies them. But they run to the arms of Jesus. Listen to the words of David in Psalm 63 as he was hiding in the wilderness, running for his life. "O God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land where there is no water." Skipping down to verse 3. "Because your steadfast love is better than life. My lips will praise you. My soul clings to you. Your right hand upholds me." Unfortunately, for many of us, we need the wilderness experience to keep us on our knees, to keep us seeking God's presence. Again, Reisner says in her blog, "My desire for God is fueled by my need." And it is at the areas of loss where I feel my need most intensely. Unmet desire keep me on my knees and make me ransack the Bible for God's response. This is said by a woman who has suffered physically greatly, who has suffered the hardship of a marriage that broke up as a result of her physical illness. And yet, she says, "I found peace. I found real blessing at those times." Prosperity leads to independence and self-reliance rather than seeking God. We normally associate blessing with having those needs met. But a blessing could actually be when we find ourselves alone. Listen to the words of Paul in 2 Corinthians 12. "So to keep me from becoming conceited because of my surpassing greatness of the revelations." So Paul's saying, you know what? I found the temptation to kind of pat myself on the back and consider myself very fortunate and get the big head, because after all, God is using me to proclaim His holy word. God is using me to convey Scripture. And he says, God gave me something that would keep me humble. He gave me a thorn. A thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Paul's thorn in the flesh was a blessing from the Lord to keep Paul in fellowship with Christ, to keep Paul depending upon the Holy Spirit to work in his life. Listen to what he says in Philippians 4. I have learned to be content in every situation, whether he had an abundance or he was in need. Contentment comes as we learn to be satisfied in our relationship with Christ. So what is being blessed? What does it mean to be blessed? It means being favored by God. Means being favored by God. No matter what he sends our way to draw us closer to him. Therefore, the most painful, agonizing experience can be a blessing. Again, Reisner says, a blessing is anything that draws us closer to Jesus. Anything that helps us relinquish the temporal and hold on tightly to the eternal. So what's the lesson for us? Do not waste your time trying to figure out or asking why when hardships come. Do not spend your time feeling sorry for yourself, but use that difficulty. See it as a blessing, because it may be what God uses to draw you into an intimate relationship with him. According to John 17, it is Jesus' desire that we be one with him. And unfortunately, for many of into in order for that to happen, in order for us to be drawn into that into that intimate relationship with him, he has to first break our will, our pride, our self-reliance. In other words, he needs to bring us to the end of ourselves, because only then will we understand that the greatest blessing of all is an intimate relationship with him. Now, I could share several illustrations here in closing, but I want to share one with you about a young girl named Katie Davis, Majors now. As a young lady, she ended up going to Uganda. And she lives there, and she begins to adopt some girls. And she wrote a book about 10 years ago, and she has written a new book because a lot has happened to her over these last 10 years. You see, she talks in her book about making some relationships with people. And how she thought that that God should bless her because of what she has chosen to do. And if she just prayed, that God should answer those prayers for her. Well, in her book called Dare to Hope, or Daring to Hope, she talks about making friendships with one particular lady. And she became very, very close to this lady. And this lady became very sick. And she begins to deteriorate physically. And Katie talks about spending hours with this lady and praying for hours over this lady. And yet she kept getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And this young lady has 5 children of her own. And eventually one day, she dies. Right there in Katie's arms. And Katie talks about becoming very angry at God. Because how could she What was the use? How could this woman's death come at the hands of a loving God who could have easily restored her? And she says, over a period of time, she comes to realize that what she learned in that situation was that the greatest blessing of all was spending time with Christ, was feeling His presence, and that the greatest blessing of all was knowing Jesus. And so God used that to transform her and her ministry. I want to share another illustration. When my children were in school, they had a teacher. His name was Mr. Andrews, very popular teacher. Just a very good man. The kind of, just everyone liked him. Well, he develops cancer. A cancer that was horrific. And I remember going to see him one night with my son and a couple of other people, and here he was. He had had a number of surgeries on his face, and his face was all disfigured. And I remember him and his wife sitting there together as we visited them, and hearing them both say they would not trade the experience they had gone through over the last few months. Because what it did is it brought them to the place that Jesus became their life. Their marriage improved. Their whole entire life improved because they had been brought to the place that they were totally broken. And all they had left was clinging to Jesus. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was their greatest blessing. So what's the lesson for us? At the end of the day, blessing is not having a big house. Evidence of God's blessing is not even health or wealth. But a blessing from God is whatever God uses to bring us to the place that we understand the greatest joy, the most fulfilling joy is knowing Him. And so I think this is particularly relevant for our church. We've got so many people who are sick, who are dying, who are no longer able to even be here. And we're tempted to look at that as, what's going on, Lord? Why all of this hardship? Why all of these bad things? But in reality, it could be God's blessing on us. Because it's at those dark times, those hard times, that we'll be drawn closer to Him. So let's stop thinking when we see someone out there with a new car or something else that we want is somehow God's blessing them more than me. That simply may not be true. But God may be blessing you far greater than He's blessing them by sending you something difficult in your life. Amen?